I am a little bit nervous. Okay. Kia ora everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Renee. So nice to be here. Today we have a different video. I'm excited about this video though. If you're new to this channel, if you haven't seen any of my reading vlogs or reading wrap-ups, you might not know, but in 2022 I made it my mission to read all of the work Elena Ferrante's. So all of her translated to English books, in which there are 12, and I had read 2. So yeah, I read 10 of her books in 2022. I did drag one of them over a little bit into 2023, but it was only a few days and I'm finished now. Confidently say I've completed her work and I'm going to talk to you about it today. So I am a little bit nervous about making this video. It's the first kind of video like this that I've made that isn't like a reading wrap up, a vlog or anything like that. So I'm kind of nervous. I don't want to fuck it up. I don't want to have this be absolutely horrendous. So I have written some notes on my phone. Please forgive me. I want to do this work justice and I want to make this a good informative video for anyone who may not know who she is, may not know what her work's about, and something that I can be proud of. Cool, let's get into it. First up, who is Elena Ferrante? Well, that's a question that we don't actually know the answer to. Elena Ferrante is a pseudonym for an Italian writer who I'm going to assume is a woman. I think we can safely assume Elena Ferrante is a woman. She prefers to stay out of the publishing spotlight when it comes to her books, and she has always been pretty staunch in her position of not coming forward and not revealing who she is and wanting her work to speak for itself. Feels as though she doesn't need to put a face to that, and I say she can do whatever she wants. Like, honestly, my opinion and what I think about it doesn't really matter. As long as she keeps writing amazing books, I'm happy. She writes both non-fiction and fiction. Her non-fiction work is made up mostly of essay collections where she talks about her practice of writing, how she comes about writing, different themes that she likes to explore, where those have come from. Great if you are interested in reading about writers who talk about writing. And then her fiction is mostly made up of novels that focus on women's experiences, particularly through or post World War II Italy, and even more specifically Naples, where a lot of her books are set and where she is from. She has this incredible ability to look at, examine, break down, and then very particularly detail different experiences that women go through, topics around motherhood, mother-daughter relationships, divorce, female friendships. She has this really magical ability to pinpoint hard to explain emotions, capture them so perfectly on a page, and it has become quite revelatory for me as a reader to read her words and feel like that's the unnamed thing that I've felt in the past, and to have it kind of being relayed back to you on a page in a book is just, it's beyond. I mean, I think if you've experienced it as a reader, you know what I'm talking about, but it's also just great to see like kind of like women's issues or women at the center of these stories and put great importance to these kinds of subjects and topics, and I think she does a really great job of bringing those topics to the masses and making them the focus point of her books. I think that's why they're so widely popular, and I don't know if anyone else is doing it quite the way she is, so it's pretty special. Okay, a few common themes that I noticed while reading her work are loss of innocence, writing as a path to understanding. A lot of the time her characters are telling these stories through the act of writing, and she speaks a lot about that being a way for them to work through their understandings of their lives or a situation or their relationships. to the other characters. She talks about this concept of Frantumaglia, or this word Frantumaglia, in her essay collection, which is titled Frantumaglia. It's a word that her mother described would use growing up, that didn't necessarily have like an exact meaning, but it often, I think it translates to like fragments or shattered thoughts, and the way she describes it in her book is exactly that. It's these shattered thoughts inside a woman's mind, and it's something that a lot of her female characters seem to be experiencing. She likes to explore fraught and difficult relationships, particularly with friends or mothers and daughters. There is always this sense of something being unearthed or discovered, or memories being tapped into. Patriarchal oppression is often a part of what the male characters in her books represent, and the female characters are often trying to overcome that oppression. Back to the same point of the writing as a way of understanding the importance of storytelling, so the importance of these characters as women being able to tell their own stories and have them be important and taken seriously, is another huge theme that I think covers or is brought up in many of her novels. So that's kind of like who she is, what she writes about, what I've noticed. So now we're going to get into the books themselves. Now, for the sake of this video, and because I want to, I'm going to treat the Neapolitan Quartet as one novel. Elena Ferrante has many a times said that she feels as though it is one novel in 4 volumes, and that's the way she wrote it, and the only reason it was brought out the way it was is because of its size. So I am going to treat those books as one in this video, and I'm not going to talk about them individually. I will talk about them as a whole. So with that in mind, I have 9 books to rank from my least favorite to my favorite. I'm happy to have anyone come into the comments and tell me what they think, or if I'm wrong. But yeah, this is just my opinion because it's my channel and I can say whatever I want. So coming in at number 9, we have The Beach at Night, which was published in 2007. It's a story about a lost doll that spends the night alone at the beach, and it's told in a children's book format with illustrations. So it's this dark fable that touches on themes of jealousy and abandonment, themes that you kind of see reoccur throughout Ferrante's novels. It has this really sweet central message of the special secret language that children develop with their dolls or their toys, and how that kind of magic is created when languages are shared between kind of close friendships. A lot of people think that this could be the alternative story for the lost doll that features in The Lost Daughter, which is valid, I think. It could totally be that. Okay, number 8, we have Incidental Inventions, which was published in 2019. This is a collection of articles that Ferrante wrote for The Guardian newspaper over the period of a year. So each article is short and focuses on any array of random topics that Ferrante has chosen week to week. They cover things like fear, death. She looks at like particular types of grammar. There's a really cool article that talks about The Lost Daughter, one of her books, being adapted into a film. It was really fun to hear her comment on that. She says something quite interesting about how she is more than happy to have a woman adapt her work and interpret it the way that they see fit, but she wouldn't feel so good about a man doing it that way and would expect to be consulted, which she has in the past. Her work has been adapted into films quite a bit. Yeah, I found it interesting as a writing practice for her, and this is something she kind of touched on in the introduction. The idea of not force writing, but having to write week to week and produce something in the end, I think, as a practice for a writer would be quite fulfilling, perhaps, quite freeing. I feel like the articles themselves were like pretty low stakes. They didn't have a lot of that particular thing, that Ferrante thing that I like, but it was fun to read. I think that this book would be a good one to read over a year, maybe as a slow kind of year-long project, to get the full scope of what it would have been like, how it was supposed to be as an initial project, and yeah, perhaps just something fun to think over for the week, a Ferrante thought, if you like. Okay, number 7, we have Traveling Love, which was published in 1992. This is her first novel to ever be published. Dahlia is the narrator. She's a woman who has unexpectedly and mysteriously lost her mother and is trying to figure out what has happened to her in the days leading up to her mother's death. The story kind of started to blur the lines between dreams and realities and like memories and false memories. Dahlia is haunted by her mother, and while she's trying to figure out what has happened to her, she's reminded of the men who inhabited and made up a lot of her childhood, and learns how much her mother was abused and a victim to those men as well. It's a lot about Dahlia as a daughter realizing that she doesn't want to become like her mother, and there is this specific imagery of her wanting to shed that connection that she has, or that thought or that feeling that she has of not wanting to turn into her mother, but also realizing that she's never going to completely be able to cut those physical blood ties with her mother. An interesting read for me, not my favorite of her fiction, but it's the beginning of that character that she likes to write about, that struggling woman, and I can appreciate it for that. At number 6, we have In the Margins, which was published in 2021, so her most recent book. It's a collection of essays which describes Ferrante's writing practice and many of her influences as well, right from when she was a child through to now. She talks about the female characters in her books and offers up small kind of revelations as to what motivates them, all very kind of interesting tidbits about, I guess, the behind the scenes for her. It's a very small book, but it is very dense. I find that Ferrante's non-fiction writing is still very steeped in that minute detail that she likes to use in her fiction. It's really interesting, I think, if you've read her work. I wouldn't recommend it as a book if you haven't read any of her work. Kind of need that to understand a lot of the references that she's making. Like I said about her essays, they're great to read if you're interested in writers who write about writing. Okay, number 5, we have The Lying Life of Adults, which was published in 2019. It's a coming-of-age novel. Giovanna is our narrator, and she is a young girl who's become entangled in the lives of the adults around her. One day she overhears her parents discussing her and describing their concerns about her. In that discussion, she hears her father refer to her as ugly and feels as though she is becoming like Vittoria, who is his sister, a woman that Giovanna knows is not very well liked in their family. She knows that her parents do not like her. She becomes interested in her aunt as this person she's been compared to, and she wants to know what her parents' fears are, so she asks to meet her aunt. And then from there she develops this relationship with her. It also kind of is the kicking off point for her learning about a lot of the lies and the secrecy going on between her parents, who have for much of her life tried to keep her quite protected and sheltered from the world around her. It's a book that describes the act of coming of age for a young girl as this very violent thing. It's violent against your body, your emotions, your sexuality. You see this realization through Giovanna that the truth to being an adult is filled with deception and disappointment. For her, a veil is lifted on the world, and what's revealed is harsh and horrible, and we see it and we read it in Giovanna, and it's sometimes quite hard to watch or hard to read. Again, not my favorite of her fiction, but I still found her character exploration and that new type of relationship between Giovanna and her aunt Vittoria is an interesting one, as like this gateway into from a sheltered world into like the big bad world, I guess. Okay, number 4, we have the Days of Abandonment, which was published in 2002. So our central character in the book is Olga, and she is left reeling after her husband decides to leave her for a much younger woman. The novel is about the aftermath of that decision and the unraveling of Olga and her state of mind during that process. It's a very claustrophobic and volatile story. Olga is left feeling as though she's lost control over much of her life. There's this incredible feeling of injustice throughout the entire book. We feel it kind of seethe out from Olga. She's so angry about the power that he wields over her with this one decision that he has made. It's an intoxicating and often nauseating book to read that painfully, explicitly describes divorce in its ugliest and truest form. I would say if you are interested in this book and you like the idea of divorce, read Domenico Starnone's Ties. Or even just read the first chapter of that book. It's so good. I honestly believed that it was written by a woman. That's how good it was. And then it's interesting that I bring up that book because Domenico Starnone is someone that has often been, I don't want to say accused of, it's because it sounds like he's done something wrong. He has been often said to be Elena Ferrante, writing under that pseudonym. A lot of people also think that Domenico Starnone is Elena Ferrante's husband. Okay, number 3, we have Frantumaglia, which was published in 2003. It's a compilation of letters, correspondence, and interviews that Elena Ferrante has done over the years, from the very first book she's published up until the Neapolitan Quartet. Released it as this kind of companion novel, companion book to her fiction for her dedicated and loyal readers. I think this is the book that if you're really interested in Ferrante as a writer and the themes that she explores and want to hear her talk more candidly and honestly and sometimes quite casually about her work, this is the one to read. Yeah, it's so insightful. I have so much admiration for her. Hey! I just had to go rescue a hat that was being eaten by my dog, so I kind of forgot where I was. Frantumaglia. Yeah, like I mentioned before, Frantumaglia is a phrase that her mother used growing up. Used it to describe that feeling of scattered thoughts in her brain and not being able to kind of focus those and put those anywhere. She explores that idea a lot more and how and where she's used it in her characters. Later, Olga and Dahlia. It's just a brilliant collection of essays about a writer on writing. I have so much admiration for her and the number of questions she has to field about why she won't reveal who she is. Why doesn't she just come forward? The way that she just kind of stood her ground and was like, the work should speak for itself. She just had some of the best answers and always kind of brought it back to the work. She doesn't want the focus to be on her identity. She wants it to be on her work. It's a really great collection to read and the perfect collection to end this project with. It was the last book that I read and it capped off everything really nicely and gave me a better understanding and appreciation for all that she writes. Top 2, I had a really hard time between the two of these, and like I kind of went back and forth about which one should go where, and I'm still not sure, but I think number 2 is the Neapolitan Quartet, which was published from 2011 to 2014. The novels are My Brillaint Friend, The Story of a New Name, Those Who Leave and Those Who Stay, and The Story of a Lost Child. Like I said earlier, they are 4 books, but Ferrante wrote them as one long novel, so that's the way I'm going to treat them in this, and I'm going to talk about them as a whole. So, these 4 volumes tell the lifelong story of childhood friends Elena Greco, or Lenu, and Raffaella Cerullo, or Lila. Them growing up in a rough neighborhood of Naples, and you see them as they become young women, mothers, they establish careers, and then eventually when they settle into older age. The story is told from Lenu's point of view as an older woman who is wanting to capture the memory of her friend Lila in her writing, and so has chosen to tell their story. The girls are both very intelligent, but they apply that intelligence throughout their lives in very different ways. We see as they get older the way that their paths diverge, but this intense bond that they have always brings them back together. The story explores female friendship and is probably one of the best depictions of female friendship I've ever read. It shows it in its many forms: love, jealousy, loyalty, honesty, and it paints this real complex picture of what it truly means to feel connected and bonded to someone that isn't your family in that way, but feels as though you couldn't live without. I think that is something that people as readers recognize and connect with the most in her books, which is why they have become as popular as they have all over the world, and why they'll always be some of my favorite books to read. So at number 1 we have The Lost Daughter, which was published in 2006. Yeah, I had a bit of trouble deciding which one to make my number 1 between this and the quartet, but I feel good about this decision, and now I'm going to tell you why. So our narrator in this book is Leda. She's a writer and a mother who has gone to holiday on this island. And one day she's on the beach and she's watching this young mother with her child, and she recognizes something of herself in this mother. So from that moment, watching them on the beach, she is confronted with a lot of her own past as a mother, the decisions she's had to make when she was a young mother, this feeling of how do you not give yourself over completely to this role, or lose yourself completely to this role of mother. In her book Frantumaglia, Elena Ferrante describes The Lost Daughter as being the book that cost her the most. And I'm going to read a quote from this book. I know, reading a quote about a book from a different book. We're going there. She's asked a question by a journalist, and I'm going to read that question and her answer. The journalist says, "As a reader, I've really had an experience as intimate as reading The Lost Daughter. It's almost embarrassing to read. It touches something almost unspeakable. It's as if the beating heart of your work could be found precisely in that novel. What do you think?" And Ferrante said, "I'm very fond of The Lost Daughter. It cost me a lot to write. A story has to push beyond your very capacity to write it. You have to fear at every line that you won't make it. The books I've published all originated like that, but The Lost Daughter left me feeling the way you do when you swim until you're exhausted and then realize you've gone too far from the shore." I feel as though that is the perfect way to describe this novel and the things she's trying to explore in this book. You feel all that emotion and that weight and the importance of what this book means to her in the story. There's this brutality to which she confesses things through the character of Leda that is one of the most real and vulnerable experiences I've had with a book, and is why I had to make this my number 1 Elena Ferrante book of all her books, and why I love it so much. Okay, there you have it. I've ranked my Ferrante reading experience and a little bit about what I think about each one of them. Hopefully you found this interesting. I've found this reading project very fulfilling and very fun. It feels great to say that I have read an author's entire body of work. I feel accomplished and validated. I have to say a special thank you to my friend Sophie, who read the entire Neapolitan Quartet with me. If it weren't for you, Sophie, I'd probably potentially still be sitting on these novels and not have read any of them, so thank you. Thank you to anyone who has sent me a DM about any of these books, shared any thoughts, feelings. Let me know what you think, and I would just love it if you would share it if you think this is good, because yeah, like I said, I was very nervous about this video and like wanting to get it right and have it be something that I feel proud of, so I would appreciate any love. Thank you so much for watching this, and I will see you in the next one. Ka kite.